If I could have foreseen what the rest of the day had in store for me, I would have kicked it off with a tall drink and downed the whole thing in one gulp without an ounce of shame. I knew I'd brought this upon myself, but holy fuck. Things kicked off as soon as V and I toured through breakfast. She'd overheard some of the conversation from the shower and knew from the excitement on my face she was being dragged along for the ride. I swallowed the last bite of our synth eggs and looked at V. You ready? V glanced at me over the rim of her coffee mug and a sly grin spread across her face. You might want to get cleaned up first. I can still smell myself on you. Fuck. I'd walked right into that one, hadn't I? With an embarrassed smile, I shuffled off of the stool and grabbed some clothes. Since I would be running around all day, a pair of baggy khakis and an old tattered sweatshirt with a shark printed on the front would do nicely, but I felt like a slob when I emerged from the bathroom and saw what V had thrown on. Her acid-washed jeans clung tightly to her ass, and the red crop top she'd picked out contrasted with it perfectly. She'd laced up the heavy pair of boots she wore whenever she went out on gigs, and that sin leather jacket of hers? Carajo. I would have thrown her against the wall and railed her again if I wasn't itching to get started. Can feel you undressing me with your eyes. Is that right? Mm-hmm. V traced a lazy finger over the hem of her shirt, briefly revealing her cleavage. You sure you don't want to undress me again for real? I bit my lip. V was insatiable when she was horny. Later. We need to get a move on to meet the landlord. I closed the distance between us and kissed the tip of her nose. Besides, it'll give you lots of time to think about what I'm going to do to you later. I turned to grab my keys and froze. Rita still had my van. V cleared her throat. Just remembered you're going to be my bitch for the morning? How had I forgotten? I glanced at my holo. Rita wouldn't be up for another hour, and the landlord was waiting for me. I could try calling her, but she wouldn't be pleased. Come on, V chuckled. Your soon-to-be studio isn't far away. I'll give you a lift and we'll swing by Rita's afterwards to grab your van. I breathed a sigh of relief. This whole thing would crash and burn if I couldn't learn to get a better handle on things. I pulled my jacket over my shoulders and followed V outside. It seemed rather cold to be racing along the streets on V's bike, but my excitement propelled me forward. This would be a transformative day, and I didn't want to waste a second of it. I'd never cared much for motorcycles, but I had to admit, the Arch Nazare was as orgasm-inducing as the latest model of Mr. Stud. Cherry red accents curved around its chrome, aerodynamic frame, and other than the tires which were showing some wear, there was hardly a nick or scratch on it. I sat behind V and grabbed a hold of her as she gunned the engine and took off. My studio was only a 10-minute drive to the north. As V cruised along the sparsely populated streets, I glanced at the clusters of graffiti-covered buildings lining the roads. Gone were the towering office towers and neon-lit retail stores. Instead, a monotonous collection of dull cement buildings rose from the ground. No wonder I could afford it. But every dream had to begin somewhere, and I became increasingly excited as we drew closer to where mine was about to start. Before long, V turned a corner and pulled off to the curb behind a parked car. Silence filled the air as she shut off the engine. I looked at the building next to me. Is this it? V asked. I could hear the disdain in V's voice, though it was hard to blame her considering the run-down appearance of the place. I think so. I climbed off the bike and stretched my legs. The entrance was an old-fashioned, hinge-style doorway with no biometric panel for security. I could see the landlord waiting inside. Pretty quiet out here, V observed. Guessing the badges aren't around all that often. I rolled my eyes but stayed quiet. V was being dragged along for the ride, and I'd need to keep it thick-skinned so she could vent. Hopefully, she would lighten up as the day went on. Come on, let's head in and take a look. After you, V replied. I walked up to the entrance with V following closely behind and opened the door, holding it for her until we were both inside. At least the pictures hadn't lied. The entire space was bare except for a smattering of tarps and empty boxes scattered across the cement floor. Instead of a ceiling, there was a mess of exposed pipes and conduits interrupted by a row of industrial-grade lights. Most of the paint still clung to the walls, though I spotted several places where it had begun to flake and peel. A narrow door at the opposite wall led to a small bathroom. It was a dumpster in every respect, and it was about to become mine. I could feel V's eyes boring into the back of my skull as I approached the landlord. He was a heavy-set man, just as I'd suspected. But he'd made some attempt at professionalism, donning a pair of slacks far too tight for his stature and a stained dress shirt he hadn't bothered to tuck in. I take it you're Alvarez? That's me. He produced a tablet from his pocket and handed it to me. My heart began pounding in my chest as I looked down and saw the terms of the lease staring back at me. Just sign here and provide your biosig here. He pointed to the areas on the screen where my attention was needed. What kind of security system you got installed here? God damn it, V. She already knew the answer and had just felt the need to jab at me. There's no security on the premises, he replied in a dull tone. Tenants are responsible and liable for anything you install on your own. Once the lease expires, anything that's left behind becomes mine. I already told you that, V, I said as I continued glossing over the fine print. Gonna need to get yourself some hardware, Jude. Better lock for those doors, a couple of cameras for the interior and exterior. Hell, you'd probably even want to consider a turret. I spun on my heels. V, enough. You said you would back me on this, so help me out here, alright? I got a long list of shit I already know I need to get without you pointing out the obvious. V raised an eyebrow, but said nothing further, choosing instead to give a disapproving kick against one of the tarps. I turned back to the landlord. After a few swipes of my fingers to make things official, I handed it back to him. Thanks. He reached into his pocket and produced a slim metal key. Here's the key to the door. I examined the thin piece of metal before sliding it into my pocket. He bent over to reach for a stack of papers by his feet, and I had to suppress a laugh as his pants stretched obscenely to the point where I thought they would burst at the seams. But the stitching held, and he handed everything over to me. Copies of everything for your records. You've got the first month down already, so your next payment will be due on the 13th of the following month. Utilities will be due on the 30th of this month, prorated. Any problems? There's a number on the back of the folder for the association that manages the grounds. Just mention my name, Cypher. Word of the wise. Don't have any problems. I snorted at the same time V scoffed. Any questions? Taking V's silence to be her final step of approval, I shook my head. Nope. Congratulations, he grumbled on his way out the door. It had suddenly turned quiet in the studio. I knew V was seething at the way I dismissed her earlier, but I refused to feel guilty about it. Yes, I was grateful to have her as my chauffeur and for agreeing to the whole endeavor, but that didn't mean she'd get to ride my ass over every little detail. When it became apparent V was waiting for me to say something, I did the only thing I could think of to diffuse the tension. Echo! V flinched as my voice bounced off the walls. She was trying to keep a stern expression on her face, but I could see a smile tugging at her lips. I raised a finger and gestured for V to come over to me. When she was close enough, I wrapped my arms around her waist. Have I said thank you yet? It was a staring contest, and V was losing. A grin finally spread across her face. Not sure. You might have to remind me. I glanced down at the floor. Want to break in the new place? I'd meant it as a joke, but something about the thought of fucking on the dirty floor made my heart race. I was surprised when V didn't take the bait and looked at the door instead. Maybe once you get this place locked up tight. I'm serious about the security, Judy. I know you got a bunch of things to get to, but don't fuck around with that. Yes, V, I teased in a dismissive tone. It was jarring for V to suddenly be so concerned about all the bad things which might happen. After all, she was the one who'd perfected the habit of rushing into things without thinking. If only she would be this cautious about her own line of work. V breathed a sigh. So, what's the plan? Gonna send a text to Rita and let her know we'll be by to pick up the van in a bit. I also want to call Roxanne and give her the good news before I swing by the BD shack and pick up all the shit I need. All the shit? V repeated. Is that what we're calling our hard-earned eddies now? It is. Gonna be some really preem shit, though. V cast a wary glance at the studio and shook her head. I'm just gonna keep telling myself that I believe in you. I returned her smile. Damn right you are. You'll see. The drive to Rita's place took forever. I'm sure V could sense how restless I was becoming, but how could she blame me? We were driving away from my studio, and I was eager to get things in motion so I could start my business. Everything was in my hands now. Any problems, delays, whatever, it would all be up to me to figure out. I'd seen several versions of Rita before. The angry bouncer throwing a drunkard to the curb, the friendly choom who carved out some time to lend an ear, even the introspective one who hinted at something better for herself but rarely voiced it. Seeing Rita as the hungover girl who barely managed to drag herself out of bed was something new. Rita was still wearing the same pants from the night before. I couldn't tell if she had on the same shirt since a heavy blue coat had been pulled over her shoulders. A tangled mess of hair sat atop of her head, and her lips were unusually dark, almost black. She barely said a word to me when she emerged from the lift of her mega building and handed me the keys. I did the good choom thing and asked if she was alright, which earned me a mumbled reply. but Rita apparently didn't want to talk and had only cast a brief glance at V before saying farewell and heading back inside. V was in a better mood and even offered to come with me to the BD shack, but I told her not to worry about it and to go home. Given my recent experience signing the lease, I wasn't sure I wanted V looking over my shoulder as I racked up a bunch of bills. Once I was on my way towards the mall, I called Roxanne and smiled when she picked up. "Hey, Judy, how's things?" "Hey, Roxanne, grab onto your nips, 'cause I got some preem news for you." "What is it?" I bit my lip in anticipation. "I got the studio. V was cool with it, and I signed the lease this morning. I'm on my way to the BD shack now to get the gear." "Holy shit, that's fucking amazing." I took a moment to bask in Roxanne's laurels since I was in complete agreement with her. It was pretty fucking amazing. But something in Roxanne's tone gave me pause. "What is it?" "Nothing. Just happy is all." "Come on, Roxanne. You can tell me." She sighed. "It's just... I'm just feeling a little scared now. I'm headed to Clouds right now to start my shift, so I guess... when would we walk out?" I'd been in such a rush to brag about my good news, I hadn't considered what needed to happen next. Before I could scroll anything, I'd need actors and actresses, and in order to get them, they would need to say goodbye to Clouds. For good. I pondered the question, trying to organize everything in my head. I'd say not for another week, at least. I still gotta clean the place up, set up all the recording gear, not to mention actually write some scenes the dolls can run through. You mean scenes I could run through. My cheeks turned red. I tried not to think about it, but soon there wouldn't be any avoiding the matter. Roxanne was a chum of mine, and while it wasn't any secret what she did for a living, I'd soon see a different side of her. Could I direct a friend I'd known for years how to squirm and moan when they orgasmed on camera? "Hey," I said, saving that problem for another day. "We're all adults, Roxanne. Ain't nothing to be embarrassed about." "Really? Then why are you blushing?" "Probably for the same reason you are." We were two women giggling our asses off over the porn we were soon going to be making. It was incredibly awkward, but was becoming less so with each moment. "So," Roxanne cleared her throat, "what do you want me to tell the others?" "Just tell them their time under the claws is almost up. I'll call you when I'm all set." "All right." Roxanne fidgeted uncomfortably. "I guess, what do we do if they try to stop us?" Her fear was understandable. Neither of us had forgotten what had almost happened the last time I'd organized a takedown of Clouds. "Roxanne, this isn't going to be like last time. We're not trying to run them out of the joint or anything like that. You're just turning in your chip and moving on with your life. They can't stop you from doing that." That seemed to reassure her. "Thanks, Judy, for everything. I'm almost there. I'll talk to you later." "You can count on it." I hung up, feeling managerial already. I looked at the long line of cars barely moving ahead of me, and I realized I must have hit the lunch rush. The day was flying by. While I waited, I pulled up the number Susie had given me and repeated Katie's so I wouldn't forget it. I knew this would be an awkward conversation, considering I'd already seen more of her than most ever would. And sure enough, the young woman was thoroughly confused when she answered. Hello? Hey, is this Katie Elkram?" "Yeah." Her tone was more of a question than an answer. "Are you with Second Avenue Productions?" I blinked. No. My name's Judy Álvarez, and I work at a Lizzie's bar as a BD technician. You got a sec to chat?" "Yeah." When it became apparent she wasn't going to say anything else, I continued. "I got your name from a BD a client of ours brought in a few days ago. This is, a little awkward, but I wanted to reach out and see how you're doing. You didn't look too comfortable in the scene." The girl, Katie, I reminded myself, quickly looked away from the screen. I figured presenting it as a question would be a less aggressive way to broach the topic. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah." Was "yeah" the only word in her vocabulary? I was about to ask that very question when she finally discovered her voice. "It was the first scene I ever did. Was it bad?" My heart almost broke. She was actually worried. If she was already living with that kind of self-doubt, then the streets would eat her alive. "No, not at all. In fact, I'm opening an independent recording studio, and I was wondering, well, that's not true. I was hoping you might swing by at some point and maybe scroll some scenes. I almost winced at the question I just posed, but I wasn't used to talking with someone so innocent. I had apparently hit the mark, though, as her eyes lit up. Really? I nodded. And here's what I'll promise you. You're not gonna be working with any scuzzy creeps. My actors and actresses are former dolls, chooms of mine, in fact, who understand what it's like to work in this industry. It'll all be consensual, and you'll make way more eddies than you would scrolling for the likes of whoever you did your first one with. It felt great to be offering her this opportunity. This was exactly why I joined the Mox. Things with the gang had developed over the years until all I seemed to be doing was editing porn for Susie. We never helped those who were being taken advantage of like we were supposed to. I, it's okay, I said, stifling a laugh. Here's what you should do. If you got any more scrolls scheduled over the next week, cancel them, okay? Katie nodded. I'll probably be ready to start scrolling scenes sometime late next week. I've got your number, and I'll call you when I'm ready with the deets. I don't know what prompted me to say what I did next, but a part of me felt like I had to. After all, she would be my employee soon. Employee. I liked the sound of that. And if you need eddies to make ends meet until then, let me know, and we'll work something out. She was almost on the verge of tears, and all because I'd offered her a job recording porn with a bunch of fed-up dolls ready to squeeze out from the grip of a sadistic street gang. Clearly, I was a saint. Thanks so much. I think I'll be okay till next week. Can I ask a question? Of course. Please don't feel like you can't ever ask me something. What's your question? She was almost terrified. What had happened to her? All kinds of scenarios played out in my head. Maybe she'd been abandoned by her parents at an early age and grown up in a foster place? Or perhaps she'd lived with a relative who was a little too friendly with their hands. Whatever had happened, she had no self-confidence. I would change that, starting today. If I, say I need to stop for a break or something, is that okay? My eyes stung. How could Night City take someone so innocent and chew them up so violently? Of course, I replied, pushing away the lump rising in my throat. You'll be the one in control, and if you're not comfortable, then I won't scroll a thing. Period. She was beaming, and by the time she hung up, I was ready to walk out of Lizzie's and devote myself entirely to the studio. Not that I'd actually do something that gonk. At least, not until my business was fully up and running, and as far as that was concerned, I needed to think of a name for the new enterprise. The traffic seemed lighter, the buildings less oppressive, as I made my way through the city. When I reached the mall, I nearly leapt out of my van and rushed toward the BD shack. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow as I wandered from one aisle to another, stuffing my hands with everything I would need. I spent a lot. So much so that I cringed when I authorized payment and transferred the eddies from my account. Some of those eddies were V's, and they had been hard-earned. But I forced my apprehension aside as the owner filled the bags with one box after another. Opening them up would be a rush. I was grinning from ear to ear as I marched back to the van, barely able to hold on to everything. It wasn't lost on me how quickly things had changed from just a few days earlier, how much I had wished for this moment to come true. The sun was lowering toward the horizon as I made the long trek across Night City. It was only when I was drawing closer to the studio that I realized I wouldn't have time to open everything up. The day had passed in the blink of an eye, and I would soon need to start my shift at Lizzie's. I decided to turn on Charter Street and head home. Everything would be safe there until tomorrow, when I could devote some time to unpacking it all. The flight up the stairs was precarious. I don't know why I insisted on trying to get everything in one trip, and by the time I reached the top of the stairs, my muscles were screaming for relief. Fortunately, V heard the bags jostling in my hands as I tried to get my wrist in front of the scanner and let me in. Her eyes widened as I shuffled inside, bags scraping against the walls. Holy shit. Are we broke? I rolled my eyes, as if I'd gone on my own personal shopping spree. Yeah, V, forgot to tell you, we're getting thrown out onto the streets tomorrow. Try to have your things packed up. V grabbed a handful of bags just before they spilled to the floor as I finally kicked my shoes off. It seemed pointless to do that, considering I would put them right back on and go to work. Then I noticed V had her boots on. You going somewhere? Yeah, V said joylessly. I got a gig out in Rancho again. I won't be back until late tonight. I spotted the pistol strapped to V's holster as she zipped up her jacket. It was a rare sight, for which I was grateful. As reckless as V could be, she still did a good job of keeping her wares out of sight, knowing they made me uncomfortable. I'd handled irons before, but it was a constant reminder of the danger she was exposing herself to. V must have noticed where my eyes had gone. I'll be safe. Be sure that you are. Not sure I like you going out to that part of town. Where else am I gonna go? I'm a fucking pariah in Westbrook. At least in Rancho, they're still willing to pay for a merc who ditched a contract. The bags I was holding suddenly felt heavier. I set them down and wrapped my arms around V, holding her tight. I know I said thanks before, but I wanted to say it one more time. Thank you, V. And be safe out there. All this shit's worthless if you're not with me. I know, Jude. V nestled her head into my neck. I believe in you. I forced a smile to my face as V gave me a peck on the cheek and ventured out. As soon as the door slid shut, I heaved a sigh of exhaustion. I'd signed a lease, spent a fortune, organized a walkout, and changed the life of a young woman, all before even showing my face at Lizzie's. I should have felt elated at everything I'd accomplished, but V's words echoed in my ears. Suddenly, I was filled with a sense of dread. What if I failed?